Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the only place where we take the entire chaotic, dense stack of global news from the most minute particles in the universe to the highest stakes geopolitical flashpoints and really try to distill it down into pure, usable insight.
And we've got a massive mission today. We are navigating a collision zone, really.
Yeah.
It feels like fundamental physics is literally buckling.
Buckling, yeah, that's a good word for it.
And at the same time, you have technology that's pushing the very definition of human consciousness, challenging the stability of truth. And then there are these international tensions spiking violently across the globe, especially in the Middle East.
Exactly. And our goal for you, the learner, is to find some absolute clarity and synthesis in all this. We want you to walk away understanding not just the headlines, but the crucial sort of interconnections between them.
Right.
Because honestly, what happens in a wide binary star system might, it might end up dictating how we govern a generative AI chatbot. These themes of radical instability, they're everywhere.
You're absolutely right. Let's briefly tease out some of the shocks we've encountered. We have scientists challenging everything Newton and Einstein taught us about gravity. The universal rules, it seems, might only be universal. Well, up to a point.
And speaking of mind benders, we've got the eternal question of digital immortality. We're looking at these emerging brain preservation techniques and some deeply, deeply unsettling ethical questions raised by startups.
Oh, the ones that tie consciousness transfer to medically assisted death.
Yes. That's a concept that truly pushes the limits of human law and, frankly, identity itself.
And then on the ground, you have this intense geopolitical volatility. The situation in Iran is escalating so rapidly. It's fueled by massive internal protests, economic collapse, and external threats that are causing the U.S. and the U.K. to actually pull personnel from key military bases.
And while all that's happening, we're seeing new imperialistic claims over territories like Greenland, forcing a strategic military response from European partners.
And don't forget the technology just going wrong. I mean, in the most public, bizarre, and politically damaging ways possible.
You're talking about the UK police admitting they used AI, generative artificial intelligence, to fabricate an entire intelligence report.
An entire report, yeah, which led to this massive crisis of public trust.
So the common thread today is this idea of radical redefinition, whether it's the stable structure of the universe, stable ethical governance, or stable international borders. We are charting a course through that instability.
And we're going to provide the context and the competing viewpoints you need to truly grasp the scale of these shifts.
So settle in. We're going to give you the depth and the detail you need to master this material without the overwhelming information overload. Okay, let's unpack this seismic shift in the world of physics, because this truly is a challenge to fundamental laws. I mean, for centuries, we had Newtonian mechanics describing gravity perfectly on Earth.
Right, for everything we could see and touch.
Exactly. Then Einstein's general relativity expanded that, showing gravity as the curvature of space-time. But now you have researchers out of Sejong University in South Korea publishing in the Astrophysical Journal, and they're basically saying that neither framework really holds up in certain specific cosmic scenarios.
What's particularly fascinating here is the subject of their study. They aren't looking at exotic black holes or the moment of the Big Bang.
Nothing that extreme.
No, they're looking at something relatively common in our galactic neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
Wide binary star systems.
So just to be clear, that's simply pairs of stars orbiting a common center of mass.
That's it. But the key is that they're separated by enormous distances, which leads to these very, very weak gravitational interactions between them.
And they had a huge data set to work with for this, I assume. You'd need one for a claim this big.
Oh, precisely. They analyzed observational data from the European Space Agency's Gaia Space Telescope, which is cataloging billions of celestial objects. Their sample focused on over 26,500 wide binary systems just within 650 light years of Earth.
26,500. Okay, so that's a tremendously robust sample size. That gives their findings some significant weight.
It does. And what they found is that at a very specific ultra-low level of acceleration, physics as we know it seems to just break down. That's the critical threshold.
Right. Tell me about that threshold.
That's the core discovery. When these stars experience these ultra-low accelerations, and we're talking about tiny, tiny movements, around 0.1 nanometers per second squared.
Which is almost nothing.
Almost nothing. Their observed orbital motion deviated significantly by 30 to 40% from what general relativity and Newtonian gravity predicted.
30 to 40%, that's colossal in physics. That's not a rounding error. It suggests that gravity is somehow stronger, or at least operating differently, than we predicted at these vast cosmic distances.
Yeah, where the gravitational fields are ultra weak.
It feels like this has to be some kind of statistical error, or a bias, or an experimental problem. How sure are the researchers that they've ruled out things like that?
Well, that's the crucial point of the study, and it's why it's generating so much discussion. The researchers spent a considerable amount of time modeling every known source of error, including the possible influence of stray interstellar gas or, unseen companions.
So they tried to explain it away with normal physics.
They did. And their conclusion stands that the deviation is statistically significant and cannot be easily explained away by standard modeling. And this points very strongly to a threshold effect.
A threshold effect, meaning standard physics works perfectly above a certain acceleration level, but once you drop below that, the rules just change.
Exactly. At higher, more typical accelerations, say, when the stars are closer or moving faster, standard physics holds true, the observations align perfectly. But once you dip below that specific low acceleration threshold, gravity appears to exert a greater influence than predicted by the classical inverse square law.
So if Newton and Einstein are failing us at this ultra-low end of the spectrum, where does this deviation lead us? I mean, it sounds like we need to revise the entire textbook.
This is where we bring in something called modified Newtonian dynamics, or MOND.
MOND.
Yeah. MOND was proposed by a physicist named Mordechai Milgram back in the 1980s. It's essentially a revised gravitational framework that suggests a slight modification to the law of inertia, or gravity itself, specifically in weak gravitational fields.
Okay, but usually we invoke dark matter to solve these kinds of gravitational mysteries, like the galaxy rotation curve problem, where galaxies spin too fast. Why bother with MOND if we already have dark matter theory?
That's the core intellectual conflict in modern cosmology. The traditional cold dark matter, or CDM model, solves that galaxy rotation problem by positing these huge, invisible halos of mass.
Right, just stuff we can't see that adds gravity.
Exactly. MOND, however, argues that you don't need this invisible mass, you just need to tweak the equation for how gravity behaves when it's extremely weak. And this new study on binary stars provides some of the strongest empirical support for a MOND-like effect we've ever observed, especially this close to home, in our local galactic neighborhood.
Which makes it difficult for the CDM proponents to just dismiss it.
Very difficult.
Wait, so if MOND is so elegant in explaining these phenomena, why are cosmologists still spending billions of dollars building detectors to find dark matter particles? Shouldn't we just, I don't know, dump CDM?
Well, it's not that simple, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Relativity explains almost everything else. The cosmic microwave background, gravitational lensing, black holes. MOND is excellent at galactic scales and maybe these ultra-weak binary scales, but it really struggles with large-scale cosmology, like explaining the dynamics of entire galaxy clusters.
So the implication, as you pointed out, is that we might need some kind of sophisticated hybrid model.
That's where this is heading, a model where Einstein's general relativity governs the strong and intermediate fields, but MOND takes over for these ultra-low acceleration environments, and that forces a complete paradigm shift.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, a shift in our understanding of fundamental gravity has profound implications for dark matter and dark energy, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. If MOND can explain some of these gravitational anomalies without invoking dark matter, it significantly challenges the cold dark matter model. It means the 85% of the universe we can't see might be less about missing mass and more about missing physics.
That's the ultimate aha moment in physics, finding out the universe is governed by something a bit more nuanced than we thought.
It's a huge deal.
So moving from the nature of gravity itself to the nature of this unseen mass that allegedly comprises the universe, we have new research that is actively challenging that cold dark matter model we just mentioned.
That's right. Just to recap, CDM posits that dark matter particles are cold. They move sluggishly, slowly, ever since the Big Bang. And this sluggishness is what allows them to collapse quickly under gravity to form the structures, these halos, that seed galaxy formation in the early universe.
But there's a new idea gaining ground. The hot dark matter hypothesis.
Yes. This research suggests dark matter might have originated as hot particles moving at relativistic speeds, near the speed of light, shortly after the Big Bang. Specifically during what's called the post-inflationary reheating phase.
So the energy field from inflation transformed into matter, and the dark matter might have just kept that initial hot, fast-moving state.
Exactly.
How does that speed change the formation of the universe? What's the practical difference?
Well, if dark matter particles are moving fast or hot, they tend to stream out of small clumps. They don't collapse easily. And that suppresses the formation of smaller structures or solos in the early universe. Cold dark matter, on the other hand, predicts an enormous number of these small, dense subhalos.
And the implication here is huge for how structures formed. We know dark matter makes up about 85% of the total mass in the universe, and it's absolutely crucial for galaxy formation via those gravitational halos.
And this leads us directly to a fascinating case study that was identified by NASA's Hubble Space Telescope, an object they've nicknamed Cloud 9.
Okay, tell us about Cloud 9. What makes it such a puzzle?
Cloud 9 is a starless, dark matter-dominated cloud. Astronomers have nicknamed it a failed galaxy. It has the mass and the gravitational influence of a decent-sized galaxy. It's enormous, but it contains almost no stars.
A failed galaxy. That sounds like a cosmological tragedy, but scientifically, why is this failure so valuable?
It's invaluable because it challenges CDM's core prediction. If dark matter was cold and efficient at collapsing, structures like Cloud 9 should have efficiently pulled in enough gas and collapsed rapidly to form robust stars.
But it didn't.
It didn't. The existence of a massive, dark matter-rich cloud that failed to form stars suggests that the structure formation mechanism might be less efficient than the CDM model predicts. It potentially supports the notion that dark matter was moving too fast, that it was hotter in the early universe, preventing that small-scale gravitational collapse.
So Cloud 9 reinforces this idea that the universe is full of structures we just haven't been looking for because we were only scanning for the bright, successful galaxies. And this also directly relates back to the MOND discussion, right?
Absolutely. The persistent failure of experiments to detect WIMP's weakly interacting massive particles, which are the hypothesized particles of CDM, that failure, combined with empirical results like the MOND effect in binary stars and the existence of these large failed structures like Cloud 9. It all suggests that our current standard model for dark matter needs a serious adjustment.
So the scientific pursuit is now twofold. You're refining these theoretical models, and you're using increasingly sophisticated observational tools.
Correct. And speaking of those observational tools, scientists are pushing forward with next-generation detectors designed to identify rare interactions between dark matter particles and ordinary matter. And crucially, we are now using gravitational waves, those ripples in space-time generated by massive events like black hole interactions.
How do gravitational waves help us with dark matter?
Gravitational waves are highly sensitive to the mass distribution they pass through. So if we can observe how they interact with the halos around traditional galaxies, that gives us another key into the nature and sort of the clumpiness of the dark matter within.
So this whole field is just intensifying.
It is. It's pushing us into new territories that redefine the very fabric of the cosmos.
Right.
It seems like the deeper we look into space, the less certain we are about the most fundamental rules governing existence.
From the physics of the universe to the physics of the self, this leads us directly into the quest for digital immortality. We're sort of defining two converging fields here: brain preservation and mind uploading.
Brain preservation is the foundational, current-day focus. It's about maintaining the neural structure, the connectome, that incredibly intricate network of connections that encodes memories, personality, identity after biological death.
So the goal is just to keep the data intact until future technology can read it or maybe even restore it. And most of our listeners are probably familiar with cryonics, the cooling of a human body, used by companies like Alcor and the Cryonics Institute. But there are newer, arguably more structurally sound methods being explored that use chemical fixation.
Yes, and understanding the difference here is key. Traditional cryonics involves rapid cooling, which can unfortunately lead to ice crystal formation, and that can damage the delicate neural circuitry.
Right.
The newer research is looking at cyclical preservation techniques using specially formulated chemicals, a process known as perfusion.
And why is perfusion considered superior for structural preservation?
Perfusion stabilizes the brain tissue chemically before freezing or decay can set in. It involves flushing the vascular system with chemical fixatives like glutaraldehyde to immediately halt degradation and stabilize the neural circuitry at a molecular level.
So you're preserving the ultrastructure down to the nanometer scale.
Precisely. Because the location of every single synapse is what encodes the self. There was a pivotal 2024 study in Frontiers in Medical Technology that examined this, hypothesizing that if you can stabilize the neural circuitry long enough, future advancements could theoretically enable restoration or mapping.
So preservation is the hardware stabilization. Mind uploading is the software transferring the entire consciousness, the cognitive processes, to a digital medium.
That remains largely theoretical and is burdened by immense philosophical and technical hurdles. It requires creating a detailed neuromap of the entire brain's architecture, the connectome, and then successfully replicating its functional pathways as software in a digital format.
We don't even know if our current understanding of neuroscience is adequate to capture the emergent properties of consciousness.
We don't.
And here's where the existential dilemmas just crash in. If a mind is duplicated digitally, is it a continuation of the original consciousness? Or is it merely a copy? The physical body dies and a digital entity begins. Does that digital mind truly retain the original unique emergent properties that make a consciousness truly you?
It touches on the deepest parts of philosophy and identity. And the ethical limits are already being tested and in profoundly disturbing ways. We have to mention the Nectome controversy.
Right. This was the startup that proposed a mind uploading service, but their method, this high-tech embalming process, it was contingent upon the user opting for euthanasia, for assisted death.
Deliberate death for the sake of preservation. That takes the debate about the right to die and flips it on its head. It asks whether the promise of digital continuity justifies the termination of the biological life.
It creates this tremendous legal and ethical vacuum. I mean, is the brain legally dead if the neural tissue has been chemically preserved and stabilized?
It forces us to ask critical questions about life, identity, and crucially informed consent, especially when the promise of uploading is purely speculative. And furthermore, critics worry that if this technology ever becomes viable, it will be disproportionately available to the wealthy.
Oh, of course.
Exacerbating class divides even in the pursuit of eternity, creating a new form of digital elitism.
So the existential labor of eternal life might only be for the ultra-rich. It's clear that as the technology becomes more plausible, the need for robust ethical and regulatory frameworks becomes even more urgent.
We need to define what human identity means before we try to digitize it.
Or we risk creating a situation where individuals are prematurely terminating their lives for a speculative digital ghost.
It's a terrifying thought.
Moving from the distant cosmos down to the sprawling, expensive landscape of artificial intelligence, we have clearly entered the AI industrial complex. And this complex is defined by one primary factor: massive, just breathtakingly expensive investment driven by an undeniable arms race for computing power.
The cost of intelligence is soaring. We just saw OpenAI, a behemoth in generative AI, secure a landmark partnership with Cerebras Systems, reportedly valued at over $10 billion.
$10 billion! That's a staggering commitment for computing infrastructure. So what is Cerebras providing for that kind of cash, and why is their technology so central to this arms race?
Cerebras is providing up to 750 megawatts of dedicated computing power over the next 3 years. They're a leader in AI computing, known specifically for their proprietary wafer-scale engine technology.
Okay, so break that down for us. Wafer-scale engine.
Well, to put it simply, most computer chips are tiny squares cut from a large silicon wafer. Cerebras decided, why cut the wafer?
They use the whole wafer as one chip.
Exactly. Their wafer-scale engine is one giant integrated circuit. It's defect-tolerant and the size of a dinner plate. This allows them to achieve unprecedented parallelism, integrating all the processing and memory cores onto a single surface. It bypasses the latency, the power draw, and the complexity involved in connecting thousands of traditional smaller chips.
That explains the price tag and the demand. This deal isn't just about faster computation, it's about sustaining OpenAI's massive growth trajectory and enhancing their models to deliver faster, more complex, and ultimately more marketable responses than their competitors.
It's all about scaling capability.
Yeah.
But there's a serious counter-narrative brewing around this massive investment landscape, and that's the fear of a financial bubble.
Absolutely. Analysts are raising concerns that this rapid capital inflow really resembles the dot-com era, where massive valuations were built on future speculation rather than, current profits.
The financial data is alarming. Tech giants like OpenAI, NVIDIA, and Oracle are engaging in these substantial circular financing deals, exceeding $1 trillion.
So profits generated by one company selling chips, like NVIDIA, are then used to fund the compute operations of another, like OpenAI.
Exactly. It creates impressive top-line revenue figures, But experts warn that the net income, the actual profit outside this loop, remains significantly lower.
So we have huge amounts of money circulating within a closed high-stakes system, creating these inflated market values that might not be substantiated by actual broad market profit generation.
And this reliance on circular financing is precisely why experts, including those at HSBC, suggest that the AI sector needs a massive, continued influx of new external investment just to sustain this growth.
And if that speculative investment slows down,
The repercussions for investors, for employees, and for the broader economy could be devastating, mirroring the volatility of the early 2000s.
and complicating this economic picture is the geopolitics of silicon. The tech war between the US and China continues to escalate, making the supply chain highly political.
We saw President Trump's administration impose a new 25% tariff on NVIDIA's advanced H200 AI chips destined for China. And this follows earlier export bans on high-performance semiconductors that are deemed critical for military applications.
So the strategic goal is two-pronged. You regulate the flow of advanced technology to slow China's military and economic advancement in AI, and at the same time, you bolster domestic U.S. chip production to maintain U.S. dominance in the sector.
It's a delicate balancing act for U.S. firms. While they want to assert national security concerns, they are also losing access to the massive, lucrative Chinese market, which in turn forces Chinese firms to increase their pressure to achieve technological self-sufficiency, and to do it quickly.
Speaking of rivalry, the AI arms race isn't just in model capacity, it's moving into the human brain itself, specifically with brain-computer interfaces, or BCI.
Yes, and this involves a new internal rivalry for OpenAI founder Sam Altman. OpenAI is investing $250 million in Merge Labs, a BCI startup that Altman co-founded. Merge Labs is valued at $850 million, and it's specifically designed to rival Elon Musk's Neuralink.
The classic Silicon Valley battle of the billionaires, moving from rockets and cars to the inner workings of the human mind. What differentiates Merge Labs from Neuralink?
Merge Labs is focusing on non-invasive technology. Specifically, they're using advanced ultrasound technology to decode brain activity and transmit data. This contrasts sharply with Neuralink's approach, which involves invasive surgical implants.
So it's a huge philosophical difference.
It is. Altman's vision clearly leans toward more democratically accessible AI and neurotechnology solutions, sidestepping the masked regulatory and safety hurdles associated with surgical procedures. It's a crucial difference in this nascent high-stakes sector.
And while all this investment pours in and the technology accelerates, the ethical infrastructure is just catastrophically lagging behind, leading to these immediate public governance failures.
And that failure to prioritize safety over speed directly relates to the bubble we were just discussing.
So let's start with the Grok AI deepfake backlash, which exposed the immediate ethical limits of generative image technology.
Elon Musk's XAI company faced massive legal scrutiny from California and from European advocacy groups after its Grok image editing software was misused. And we are talking about the creation of hyper-realistic, inappropriate, and sexualized images, including the digital removal of clothing from real people.
This goes far beyond typical content moderation issues. This is a direct technological challenge to personal privacy and safety, generating non-consensual images.
Precisely. And this drew immediate backlash and pressure on the platform X itself, with advocacy groups urging tech giants like Apple and Google to remove Grok from their app stores. They argued the platform enabled the creation and dissemination of dangerous content.
What was XAI's response to this severe ethical breach?
Well, Grok was forced to implement new, specific restrictions preventing this particular misuse of digitally undressing real people. It really highlights the immense pressure platforms face when their powerful tools can be weaponized so easily.
It demonstrates that the speed of technological capability has just vastly outpaced basic ethical and safety safeguards.
Absolutely. And then, if deepfakes show the ethical risk of generative AI, the security vulnerability discovered in Microsoft Copilot demonstrates the fundamental infrastructure risk to our most trusted enterprise systems.
The vulnerability was shocking for its simplicity and potential impact, wasn't it? A multi-stage, covert attack executable with just a single click.
For enterprises relying on AI assistants integrated into their networks handling sensitive data, streamlining processes, a one-click security breach is a terrifying implication for data integrity, for corporate trust, and even national security. It shows that even supposedly secure, enterprise-grade tools harbor these critical, easily exploitable flaws.
And finally, perhaps the most publicly humiliating AI blunder, which brought AI governance failure right into the realm of public safety, the UK police incident.
This is just a stunning admission that severely damaged public trust and immediately led to leadership scrutiny. West Midlands Police Chief Constable Craig Guildford had to issue a formal apology after it was revealed an AI-generated intelligence report falsely recommended banning Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from a Europa League match in Birmingham.
Wait. They relied on AI to generate critical safety intelligence.
They used Microsoft Copilot AI, and it fabricated the core facts. The AI cited a non-existent match between Maccabi Tel Aviv and West Ham United in November 2023.
A match that never happened.
Never happened. West Ham was actually playing Olympiacos at the time, and Maccabi was in Poland. The report was pure hallucination, yet it was used as justification for a high-stakes safety assessment involving thousands of fans.
That is a catastrophic failure of due diligence. It raises a really important question. If police intelligence is based on AI that can hallucinate an entire historical football match, how can we trust any generative AI output in high-stakes public safety or judicial settings?
Especially where the consequences are measured in human lives and rights. It validates every fear about AI reliability. UK Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood criticized the police force's failure of leadership, saying the incident damaged public confidence in law enforcement.
And didn't the chief initially try to deny it?
He did. He tried to deny AI involvement, believing the fabricated match was found via a Google search, which itself shows a profound failure in understanding the difference between a search engine and a generative model. The consequence here is an immediate loss of confidence.
This entire section proves that whether AI is used to create hyper-realistic deepfakes or to generate false intelligence, the need for robust human oversight and regulatory frameworks is not just an academic debate. It's an immediate requirement to prevent the collapse of both enterprise security and public trust.
It's happening right now.
Now we take a necessary pivot from the future of technology to the deepest parts of our human past, hidden not by time, but by jungle canopy.
And it's a great connection because the technology we're using to find these secrets is the same type of technology that could lead to new geopolitical conflicts. LiDAR technology, which reveals things hidden by nature, is the same type of tech used to scan remote areas for resources or for threats.
In this case, it was used to reveal a previously hidden complex Maya city found deep in the dense jungles of Mexico. This is a truly remarkable archaeological find because it wasn't discovered by traditional digging or, hacking through the undergrowth.
No, it was found thanks to the revolutionary catalyst of technology, LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging.
And LiDAR is just a game changer for archaeology, isn't it?
It is. It's a remote sensing method that uses pulsed laser light to measure distances. When you mount it on an aircraft, it can penetrate the thick jungle canopy up to 95% of the vegetation, creating these detailed topographical maps of the ground underneath. It reveals man-made features that are otherwise obscured by centuries of growth.
So unlike traditional methods that are incredibly labor-intensive and limited by visibility, LiDAR lets researchers rapidly assess massive areas. It fundamentally changes the rate at which we can rewrite history.
Revealing entire cities in a matter of weeks. And what LiDAR revealed here was staggering. An intricate urban layout, including pyramids, stone columns, and a remarkably well-preserved Mesoamerican ball court. The sheer size and complexity of the city suggests a substantial population far greater than previously assumed for this region, and a pivotal strategic location.
That ball court is a particularly significant detail. Why is the discovery of a ball court so important to our understanding of the classic Maya period?
Well, the Mesoamerican ball game wasn't just a sport. It was a deeply ritualized, symbolic, and political event. Often the games ended in sacrifice, and the ball court itself symbolized the struggle between life and death, and also political legitimation.
So finding a major, well-preserved ball court suggests the city was not some minor outpost.
No, it suggests it was a critical hub for cultural exchange, religious practice, and political maneuvering within the Maya sphere.
And the city is believed to have been active during the Classic period, roughly 250 to 900 AD. What does the existence of a hub this complex, hidden until now, tell us about the broader Maya socioeconomic systems?
It suggests that the sociopolitical networks of the Maya were far more complex, integrated, and densely populated than our previous models assumed. We always thought we knew the major trade routes and population centers, but the existence of this major organized center implies an entirely new web of trade, competition, and migration patterns that we now need to map.
It could even reshape how we understand the classic Maya collapse, if these peripheral cities were major players.
Exactly. This wasn't just a small settlement. This was a major organized center of trade and cultural exchange, hidden in plain sight until the technology caught up with it. It just reminds us how much of our own planet's history remains obscured.
And the researchers noted that this particular site was located near a more accessible region, which suggests that many more significant archaeological treasures are likely still waiting to be discovered.
A literal gold rush for history.
So, if LiDAR technology revealed a past hidden by nature, we now turn to the Arctic, where modern territorial claims are being hidden and revealed by technology and geopolitical pressure. And this starts with the U.S. interest in Greenland.
It does. This situation is really defined by President Trump's repeated and ongoing interest in acquiring the territory. He's citing national security and potential Russian or Chinese influence over the strategic northern passages.
And this has forced an intricate and delicate diplomatic dance. We recently saw U.S. officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, meet with the foreign ministers of Denmark, Lars Løkke Rasmussen, and Greenland, Vivian Motzfeldt, specifically to discuss this complex relationship.
And we should provide some context here. The inclusion of figures like Vance and Rubio suggests that even outside the official current administration, there's a clear, long-term strategic focus on this acquisition. It represents a strong, consistent foreign policy leaning among certain conservative U.S. circles.
Absolutely. Their presence underscores that this isn't just a one-off comment. It's a sustained strategic objective. And the Danish and Greenlandic response has been unified and very firm.
The ministers expressed a willingness to solidify ties and cooperation, particularly under the NATO umbrella. But they specifically used the phrase, they agree to disagree on certain matters.
That phrase, agree to disagree, is the ultimate soft power pushback against an imperialistic claim, isn't it?
It is. It underscores Denmark and Greenland's prioritization of Greenland's autonomy, especially given that the population voted for self-governance back in 2008.
And Denmark is backing up that territorial integrity with a very tangible, physical response. Military deployment. They're deploying additional military forces to Greenland, sending an advance command to establish logistics and infrastructure.
That is a clear deterrent move. It's a visible signal to Washington, to Oslo, and to Beijing that the territory is not for sale and it is not undefended.
And this move is supported across Denmark's political spectrum, even by the left-wing party and Heads Listen.
Which is really telling. They view it as a necessary measure to deter aggressive territorial actions from larger powers. When the left and the right agree on a major military deployment like this, it's a clear signal of national resolve.
The European Union is also weighing in, making this a multilateral dispute.
Yes, the European Parliament firmly rejected what they called imperialistic claims by the U.S. concerning Greenland, emphasizing the rights of the Greenlandic people to self-determination. So this isn't just a bilateral issue between the U.S. and Denmark. It's seen by the EU as a challenge to the international norms of sovereignty.
And as a threat to Europe's internal security posture.
Exactly. And looking at the power dynamic, the analysis out of certain state-affiliated outlets, like RT, suggested that Europe's attempts to frame this as a NATO issue merely expose their impotence and the diminishing credibility of Western Europe on the global stage.
So it positions Greenland not just as a piece of strategic territory vital for missile defense and resource access, but as a symbolic demonstration of waning European influence.
And America's willingness to challenge international norms to achieve strategic dominance in the Arctic. The U.S. is prioritizing its own security framework over strict adherence to European diplomatic sensibilities.
Now, if the Arctic is a strategic chess game, Iran is a boiling cauldron of internal dissent and external threat. We've seen escalating turmoil since the protests erupted in late December 2025, initially sparked by severe economic grievances.
Yeah, high inflation, the collapsing value of the Iranian rial.
What started with labor strikes and localized demonstrations over economic justice, particularly in Tehran's Grand Bazaar, has broadened into these widespread violent protests demanding fundamental regime change.
And the discontent is fueled by political repression and the government's failure to provide adequate living conditions under this prolonged economic siege imposed by sanctions.
And the cost of dissent has been devastating. Reports cite a violent crackdown by security forces resulting in over 2,400 confirmed deaths among demonstrators. This marks the unrest as perhaps the most significant existential threat to the Islamic Republic since the 1979 revolution.
Given the scale and persistence of the violence, yes. We have to approach the narrative surrounding the violence and intervention with strict impartiality, as the claims are just wildly conflicting.
Okay, so let's start with the regime narrative.
Iranian government officials vehemently accuse external actors, specifically Israel and the U.S., of inciting the chaos, arming demonstrators, and attempting regime destabilization. They view foreign interference as manipulating genuine economic grievances into violent uprisings.
So they're providing material and financial support to those seeking to overthrow the government. They frame this as a deliberate foreign plot to prevent Iran from achieving regional dominance.
That's their line. Conversely, you have the opposition narrative, which is being galvanized around figures like Reza Pahlavi, the son of the deposed Shah, who is currently living in exile in the U.S.
And some protesters, particularly those seeking a secular democracy, have been chanting his name, positioning him as a viable alternative to the current theocratic system.
And here is where the synthesis is required. How does the economic siege imposed by sanctions directly enable the rise of exiles like Pahlavi?
Well, the sanctions environment is the engine of the crisis. By crippling the Iranian economy and devaluing the ruble, the U.S. and its allies are creating the exact conditions: mass poverty, unemployment, lack of basic services that drive popular discontent.
And this severe internal pain then opens the door for opposition figures, who are often externally supported, to step in and offer a vision of a Western-aligned future.
Which Pahlavi represents. Interestingly, President Trump himself has weighed in on Pahlavi, acknowledging his nice demeanor but expressing skepticism about his ability to garner enough popular support within Iran to actually lead a government.
Why the skepticism from the U.S. administration?
It likely stems from a political assessment of Pahlavi's leverage. Trump tends to favor strong, decisive, immediate actors. Pahlavi lacks a domestic military apparatus or the deep populist grounding required to seize power quickly. His exile status means he's disconnected from the complex, fractured internal politics of Iran.
So the U.S. administration's skepticism suggests a preference for supporting a decisive internal change rather than relying on a symbolic figure from the past.
That seems to be the calculus. And the U.S. military stance reflects the heightened risk that this situation could boil over into a regional conflict. Amid increased tensions and the possibility of a military response being contemplated, both the U.S. and the U.K. are pulling certain non-essential personnel from a critical military base in Qatar.
That kind of personnel withdrawal is not done lightly. That signals that military intelligence views the threat of direct retaliation from Tehran against U.S. or allied assets as imminent and severe.
It really underscores the gravity of this situation, especially in light of the explicit, chilling threat issued by Tehran via state-affiliated media. Iranian state television recently aired an image of President Trump
with the message, this time the bullet will not miss the target.
A direct, state-sponsored assassination threat which removes all plausible deniability. It highlights the precarious nature of U.S.-Iran relations and the lengths to which Tehran may go in response to perceived U.S. military posturing. It's an explicit escalation.
And on the topic of executions, Trump asserted, based on intelligence, that the Iranian government has paused executions of protesters due to mounting pressure.
And interestingly, the Iranian Foreign Minister, Abbas Araqi, publicly supported this claim. He denied plans to execute protesters, while still maintaining that foreign agents were inciting the violence.
That is a rare moment of agreement on a sensitive topic. It suggests that the pressure campaign, both the internal protests and external condemnation, may be achieving a tactical concession from the regime.
This whole complexity forces us to examine the ongoing foreign policy debate, the impact of U.S. involvement. Critics of intervention argue that while the economic and human rights problems are real, foreign military action or even aggressive sanctions often exacerbates the situation.
It hardens the regime's position and ultimately undermines the prospects for legitimate local social change within Iran.
It's the perennial question of how to support a populace demanding change without inviting unwanted external militaristic interference that could further destabilize the entire region. The volatility in Iran right now is a true geopolitical powder keg.
Shifting across the globe to Latin America, the political whirlwind in Venezuela continues, particularly since President Nicolás Maduro's abduction by U.S. forces on January 3rd, and we are seeing a surprising, almost stunning, potential thaw in relations between Washington and Caracas.
A significant moment occurred when acting President Delcy Rodriguez held a constructive call with U.S. President Donald Trump. And this dialogue focused on critical areas: oil, minerals, trade, and national security, aiming to build what Trump called a future spectacular partnership with Venezuela.
The change in tone is dramatic. Trump praised Rodriguez as a terrific person, which contrasts dramatically with earlier U.S. policy aimed explicitly at isolating and removing the Venezuelan leadership.
It signals a transactional shift, moving away from regime change and toward resource diplomacy.
It seems so. Rodriguez committed to the continued release of prisoners, over 400 individuals already released, as a strategy to foster peace and cooperation. However, human rights groups still criticize the slow pace, given the reported denial of political prisoner status for many opposition figures still held.
And the diplomatic strategy is highly complex, as the U.S. is maintaining a dual track. Trump is also scheduled to meet with opposition leader Maria Corina Machado.
Machado, a noted opposition figure, has faced significant state repression, including being stripped of her political rights. She will likely seek further, stronger sanctions against the current Venezuelan government. She even offered to share her Nobel Peace Prize as a symbolic gesture to strengthen the alliance with the U.S. administration.
So this dual approach, praising the acting president one day and meeting with the strongest opposition figure the next, is a classic diplomatic tightrope walk.
It's an attempt to apply pressure for democratic concessions while simultaneously seeking access to Venezuelan oil reserves.
But while this dialogue is happening, the aggressive U.S. pressure strategy continues through sanctions enforcement. The U.S. military seized the 6th oil tanker, the Veronica, claiming it violated sanctions on Venezuelan oil exports in the Caribbean Sea.
That aggressive action shows the persistent strategy of seizing control of Venezuelan oil production and funneling revenues into U.S.-controlled accounts, purportedly to stabilize Venezuela's economy.
So it's a clear contradiction. Soft words.
And tough sanctions, designed to keep both the current government and the opposition off balance.
And finally, we should note that a U.S. survey indicates a significant majority of Americans oppose Trump's proposal for military intervention in Venezuela. They strongly prefer diplomatic solutions over military action.
The domestic disapproval is key. It indicates that the U.S. public is wary of escalating military conflicts in the region, putting additional pressure on the administration to stick to dialogue, despite the ongoing seizures and political maneuvering.
Let's turn now to the ongoing conflict in Europe, specifically Ukraine, where the humanitarian crisis is worsening due to the deliberate targeting of energy infrastructure. President Volodymyr Zelensky has declared a state of emergency in Ukraine's energy sector.
This is a dire situation. It's exacerbated by plunging winter temperatures, reaching as low as -10 in Kyiv. Persistent Russian missile strikes have left thousands of citizens without heat or electricity.
Emergency crews are working tirelessly, but the scale of the damage to the grid is immense, requiring resources Ukraine simply doesn't have domestically.
And the strain of the crisis has created a public internal rift in Ukraine's leadership, which is extremely rare during wartime. There was a public dispute between Zelensky and Kyiv Mayor Vitali Klitschko over the city's inadequate response to the energy emergency.
So Klitschko, the mayor, has accused Zelensky of using populism to undermine his municipal administration and deflect blame for the power grid's failures.
And Zelensky, in turn, criticized Klitschko for the city's lagging response compared to other Ukrainian cities. The tension reflects broader concerns over centralized wartime authority versus local municipal autonomy in managing a humanitarian disaster.
Meanwhile, geopolitical pressure is mounting from the outside. President Trump commented on the situation, suggesting Ukraine is less ready than Russian President Vladimir Putin to enter peace negotiations.
That remark adds a layer of complexity to Zelensky's already challenging position, as he has firmly ruled out peace negotiations that require territorial concessions, which Russia continues to demand. It suggests external pressure for a negotiated end, even as infrastructure continues to be destroyed.
So Kyiv is contending with diplomatic pressure alongside military pressure.
Exactly. And beyond the direct conflict, we're seeing European trade disputes causing internal political turmoil, specifically in France.
Right. The French government barely survived 2 no-confidence votes initiated by the hard left and far-right parties. And the core issue was insufficient action against the European Union-Mercosur trade agreement,
which involves Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay.
So why is this trade deal so contentious in France?
Critics argue that the deal undermines French farmers and environmental standards because it would open the EU market to cheaper agricultural products like beef produced under lower environmental and labor regulations in Mercosur countries. French farmers fear they'll be unable to compete,
leading to mass bankruptcies. It highlights the ongoing struggle within the EU to balance the economic benefits of global trade agreements with the necessity of protecting domestic agricultural interests.
And the political survival of the government demonstrates their commitment to the deal, but the opposition is highly vocal about the impact of globalization on local livelihoods.
And finally, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán is standing firm against major financial support for Ukraine.
Yes, Orbán criticized the EU's proposed 90 billion loan package for Ukraine as a Brazilian war plan.
A Brazilian war plan.
He argues that it would financially burden EU taxpayers and would force Hungary, whose share would amount to over $9 billion, to cut essential social benefits like pensions and energy price support.
And the EU is still debating whether they can use frozen Russian assets to repay the loan.
Which is a highly contentious proposition in itself. It raises complex legal questions about seizing state-owned funds. This just shows the deep internal divisions within the EU regarding the sustainability and justification of massive financial support for Ukraine amidst rising domestic economic costs.
Okay, let's examine the financial realities, which are sending decidedly mixed signals in the U.S. banking sector and the broader market.
On one hand, you have major banks like Wells Fargo and Bank of America reporting increased profits, driven largely by a rising demand for loans among borrowers. This suggests a favorable lending environment and indicates resilience in the core banking sector.
Yet, despite this positive news, the overall stock market reacted cautiously. The S&P 500 fell 1%, primarily due to pressure from high-flying tech stocks, including heavyweights like Intel, Nvidia, and Tesla.
It signals that while traditional banking remains strong, investors are showing caution and vulnerability in the high-valuation, high-growth technology sector.
And linking back to the AI industrial complex we discussed earlier, we're seeing this paradox in consumer costs directly related to technology infrastructure. Consumer power bills are spiking faster than the electricity costs of nearby data centers.
That feels profoundly unfair to the consumer. Why is that happening?
This is a complex infrastructural issue. Data centers are massive, guaranteed consumers of electricity, so they often secure favorable long-term power purchase agreements. However, Google, a massive builder of these centers, highlighted that the U.S. transmission system presents significant hurdles and high connection costs for new data centers.
So innovation in energy transmission and finance is slow, leading to these localized inflationary trends in the AI sector.
Right. The massive demand from data centers competes for limited transmission capacity, driving up the costs of expanding the grid. And because the data centers themselves have guaranteed rates, the cost is disproportionately passed on to the less powerful consumer.
The public is bearing the brunt of the spiking electricity rates. It's prompted consumer advocacy discussions about placing utility oversight on the ballot by 2026.
It's a case of consumers subsidizing the infrastructure required by the digital boom.
It is. And finally, a significant sign of shifting consumer behavior and economic distress in the retail world. The Saks global bankruptcy.
Saks Global, once a luxury retail hallmark, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. This really highlights the challenges of the rapidly shifting retail environment, particularly in the mid-tier luxury sector.
And who is the most heavily affected creditor in all this?
They disclosed their top 30 unsecured creditors, with the renowned fashion house Chanel disclosed as the most adversely affected. This situation raises serious questions about the stability of the luxury retail sector overall.
And how traditional high-end brands are weathering changes in consumer spending habits.
Moving to domestic tensions, the political polarization and public backing for Dissent were vividly illustrated by the Ford heckler incident in Dearborn, Michigan.
Right. Ford employee T.J. Sabula heckled President Trump during a factory visit, shouting accusations referencing the Epstein scandal. Trump responded with an obscene gesture, which the White House subsequently defended as appropriate, given the provocation.
Sabula was suspended by Ford for his actions during the visit. But here's the kicker, and this is the measurable indicator of polarization. A GoFundMe campaign for him surged, raising over $500,000.
$500,000. That enormous amount of public backing speaks volumes about the current political climate. It's not just a donation, it's a measurable investment in political polarization, showing a willingness among the public to financially support open dissent against powerful political and corporate figures.
And the UAW, the United Auto Workers Union, confirmed the suspension but vowed to protect Sabula's rights. So this becomes an intersection of free speech and labor rights within a highly charged political atmosphere.
Next, we have increasing scrutiny on U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, following the tragic shooting of Renee Good in Minneapolis by ICE agent Jonathan Ross.
And the incident is compounded by the fact that Agent Ross himself suffered internal bleeding following the altercation, emphasizing the dangerous nature of these high-stakes encounters. Lawyers for Good's family are investigating, and the situation has ignited massive community discussion about immigration enforcement protocols and federal overreach.
What's crucial here is the shift in public opinion revealed by a recent Quinnipiac University national poll. It found that half of Americans believe ICE is making cities less safe, and a significant 57% disapprove of ICE's enforcement tactics.
That public sentiment is in direct conflict with the White House's generally favorable view of ICE. It's a clear signal to policymakers that a majority of voters are questioning the agency's impact on community safety, and we're seeing legal pushback from state governments.
Right. Governors of states like Minnesota and Illinois are invoking the 10th Amendment to limit federal agents' operations within their jurisdictions.
This asserts the state's constitutional rights against federal overreach in law enforcement matters. And while a temporary restraining order against the federal operations was recently denied, the legal challenge shows a growing tension between state and federal authority over immigration enforcement.
Before we wrap the news, let's briefly revisit the UK police AI blunder. It bears repeating because the consequences for the police chief were significant. Chief Constable Craig Guildford faced immense criticism, and Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood expressed a loss of confidence due to the failed safety assessment based on that Microsoft Copilot hallucination.
It's a perfect, tragic example of how technological failure can immediately lead to failure of leadership and public trust in high-stakes environments. It proves that oversight cannot be outsourced to an algorithm.
Absolutely. Moving to tragic infrastructure failures, we saw the deadly rail accident in Thailand. A passenger train was crushed when construction cranes collapsed onto its carriages during rush hour. At least 29 confirmed deaths resulted.
This incident immediately raises urgent questions about safety practices in construction, particularly when working in proximity to critical transportation infrastructure. Eyewitnesses described chaos, and the investigation will likely focus on regulatory compliance and oversight of construction near active railway lines.
And finally, a horrifying case highlighting critical issues in child welfare in the U.S. An Arkansas couple, Darian Urban and Shalene Ehlers, attempted to sell their 2-month-old child.
For how much?
For $1,000 in beer. The father received 3 years in prison for attempted accepting of compensation for adoption, and the mother received 6 years probation.
It underscores not only the complex issues of neglect and substance abuse, but the critical need for effective state intervention strategies in vulnerable families, and how shockingly little value some placed on human life. A truly shocking case.
We covered a tremendous amount of ground today, from the cosmic scale down to individual morality and justice. We saw scientists suggest that gravity itself is breaking down at the ultra-low acceleration scales of the cosmos, forcing a reevaluation of Newton, Einstein, and dark matter theory.
We also tracked humanity's enduring quest for immortality, with technology pushing us toward a future of preserving and potentially transferring our consciousness. This raises unprecedented ethical questions about what defines the self, especially in the wake of controversies like Nectome.
Geopolitically, we witnessed acute volatility in Iran, where severe economic sanctions have fueled internal dissent to a critical mass, prompting external assassination threats and military withdrawals. And simultaneously, we saw the complexities of the U.S. managing its influence in the Arctic and Venezuela through a combination of diplomatic praise and aggressive sanctions.
And we saw the fragility of our newest technologies, where the massive financial investment landscape has prioritized deployment speed over safety. This led AI to fabricate intelligence reports that damage public trust and result in immediate leadership crises, or create hyper-realistic deepfakes that challenge our very definitions of visual truth.
The value of this deep dive is understanding those intricate connections, how the massive speculative investments in AI computing could create a financial bubble, and how the drive for speed and deployment contributes directly to the societal failures we are now seeing in policing and governance.
Or how a single controversial political gesture by an employee can rally $500,000 in public support for dissent.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner? If our most fundamental sense of physical reality, gravity, is demonstrably breaking down at the margins of the cosmos, and our sense of biological self is moving rapidly toward digital transference, what will define human identity when both the biological body and its fundamental laws are simultaneously subject to this radical redefinition?
It raises a really important question. In a world where gravity is relative and identity is transferable, and the generative AI we rely on can literally hallucinate reality, what are the new stable anchor points we will choose to define truth and human connection?
A lot to think about until the next deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.